Orwell's 1984 has arrived. Welcome to Quayside. Google, of course, is building cities in Toronto, or I should say neighborhoods, and that is what Quayside is. It's their first one. It's 12 acres out of 800. Sidewalk Labs, a unit of Google, present Quayside. The plan for infrastructure. Tech giants such as Google are planning to build an interconnected technocracy, starting with Toronto, Canada. Sensors will detect everything, every movement, every breath. Microphones will record everything, every sound, every word, every whisper. Year-round comfort, they say, because technology, and of course architecture, will control the weather. The dystopia of the future, mentioned in George Orwell's book 1984, is just beginning.
Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better. This article is part of the annual meeting of the Global Future Councils by the World Economic Forum. Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say, our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything you considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, and all the things we need in our daily lives. One by one, all these things became free, so it ended up not making sense for us to own much. First, communication became digitized and free to everyone. Then, when clean energy became free, things started to move quickly. Transportation dropped dramatically in price. It made no sense for us to own cars anymore because we could call a driverless vehicle or a flying car for longer journeys within minutes. We started transporting ourselves in a much more organized and coordinated way when public transport became easier, quicker, and more convenient than the car. Now I can hardly believe we accepted congestion and traffic jams, not to mention the air pollution from combustion engines. What were we thinking?
Over the past decade, big data has soared. It is this information which is illegally taken from you, although you sign an agreement to hand it over. Those technology companies have used to foment the rise of analytics and social engineering. You don't own anything in the year 2030. This is just an example, but of course it's starting with Quayside. You don't own anything. Everything is a service. You don't even own clothes. You kiss your car goodbye. Everything is reusable. And of course you don't own yourself anymore either. There is a term for this. Specifically, it's called communism and/or socialism. Again, for several years, technology companies have lobbied the governments of the world for control and influence. It is only now that we are beginning to see this problem for what it is, corporate buyouts. Inasmuch as technology could be beneficial to humanity, tech giants have other plans. Starting in 1919, scientists, engineers, and technologists have held onto a plan to replace publicly elected officials with selected experts in any of the aforementioned fields. It is now in 2017 that technocrats are fully playing their hands. Throughout the 20th century, similar political theories existed, mainly through communism and socialism. However, a technocracy differs, but only slightly. A technocratic form of government is an entire government run as a technical or an engineering problem. Governments manage people, policies, and so on and so forth, right? Congratulations, according to the technocrats, you're a problem. Through the use of big data, this political ideology is no longer a mere thought of the dystopians, but rather one that is being rolled out today. Like socialism under a technocracy, the means of production, distribution, and exchange would be owned and regulated by selected decision makers. Selected, not elected. And like communism, under a technocracy, there is no private ownership, and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. Did that not just sound like, according to the World Economic Forum, the year 2030? However, like Lenin, Hitler, Stalin, and Mao, under a technocracy, all means of regulation, wages, production, society, and so on are controlled by a select few. According to an early advocate of technocracy, American economist and sociologist Veblen, technological developments would eventually lead toward a socialistic organization of economic affairs. Veblen saw socialism as one intermediate phase in an ongoing evolutionary process in society that would be brought about by the natural decay of the business enterprise system and by the inventiveness of engineers. Fast forward a century, and we are now on the cusp of such a government taking shape. In 2016, the World Economic Forum published that report, entitled Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, I have no privacy, and life has never been better. How much more of a lie is she telling herself? Now, of course, you heard Emma reading, but the author of that report is who I'm referencing when saying how much more of a lie is she telling herself? In this report, a city is depicted, and the citizenry within said city own no products, because everything is now a service. Everything is controlled and digitized. There's nothing else left that is natural. And of course, to have a kid in these dystopian futures
are doing almost no emitting, right?
So they burn some charcoal now and then.
Well, so the average Nigerian emits 0.1 metric tons of carbon annually. How many does the average American emit?
I did that with my coffee this morning.
Yeah, 16 metric tons is
so
what the average
160 times.
Yeah, exactly. And so our two kids are way more problematic. The Nigerians with an average 7 children are not the problem when it comes to climate change.
So should we have policies that penalize people for having extra kids in the developed world?
You just heard it. To create a family, to start a life, to have a life, you'd have to request it from the government. And as we just covered recently, there are lawmakers all across the world stating similar things. It's not a fringe ideology anymore to think about child restrictions or how many kids you can have, like China, like a communist nation. Anyways, back to the point at hand. These new cities, these new ideologies, if you want to call them new, because they're not really new, but these new cities, the infrastructure and such, would all be designed around sustainability. All be designed around 2030. The bottom left, of course, is Quayside, or the development of such, or the proposal of such. Have a look. As you can see, before we get to the actual area, those are normal buildings. But here, there are no walls. There is no privacy whatsoever. Everything is a window. Everything is recorded. But wait. It gets worse. The people who are fomenting this agenda are environmentalists. There are people who are teaching in colleges right now, all across America, all across the world for that matter. The same bioethicist. This is the person who advocates for ethics, folks, who is on Bill Nye, is advocating for this. According to Travis, a bioethicist and a philosopher, at the Berman Institute of Bioethics at Johns Hopkins University, the people of the world must stop having children immediately. Although Travis has a child of his own, this individual believes that the government should creep further into our private lives and limit the number of children a family is allowed to produce. You know, similar to China. The bioethicist calls his ideology population engineering. You see, we've heard all these different types of engineering scenarios where, of course, that science needs to get involved. Now we're going to see the population engineering, which of course is offering more birth control to developing countries. And of course, the birth control is meant to quell the population growth. And of course, that's going to be the answer to climate change, because according to Bill Gates and this guy, Travis Ryder, guess what? The humans are the problem. And let me read that right here. The researcher states that carbon dioxide doesn't kill the climate. People do. So as you can see, these entire new developments, these new cities, they're based around climate change, preventing quote-unquote climate change or sustainable development. But as you just heard, carbon is not the problem. People are. And of course, to quell that problem, they've come up with people engineering or population engineering. This city is totally engineered from every aspect of life. Every analytical standpoint, every piece of data, every breath is analyzed from your health care. Of course, these are the what it's going to look like. These are the development photos, again, from the actual presentation. We'll go through all of these here. There are no walls. Can you imagine if you just kind of put glass panes on every single section of your house where a wall is? These buildings are designed to rapidly change into a new usage. And what I mean by that is, so say at one point this could have been a sewage plant. Well, now it's going to be a house instantaneously. You see here with the waste underneath, we'll get back to that in just a minute, but located just southeast of downtown Toronto, the eastern waterfront contains more than 325 hectares or 800 acres of land subject to future revitalization, including Quayside and the Portlands. So as you can see, Quayside is only one little section, but the Portlands are where they're going to expand to. This is not going to happen overnight. In fact, they literally just had their community outreach meeting yesterday on November 1st. But anyways, let's get into their actual presentation, because their presentation, oh my, they've broken this whole thing down into layers. The utility channels carry wires, waste, and water. A street grid to direct movement. A public realm to provide an array of parks and amenities. Sidewalk's approach to the physical layer is designed to be adaptable. For instance, unlike traditional utility networks, which are buried in the roads and therefore disruptive and costly to change, flexible utility channels will be easily accessible and reserve space for new connections, saving time and money upon upgrades and installation. The physical and digital layers will connect via sensors to generate a shared repository of data on the neighborhood that is critical not only for day-to-day operations, but also for public agencies and third parties working to improve services. Anyone has access to your movements. Our phones, our computers, our internet usage, all that stuff is, well, sold to the highest bidder. But can you imagine what you do in your personal life, your physical being sold to the highest bidder as analytical data? The next frontier of global sustainability, that's what they're going with this Quayside attempt here. And oh boy, is it disgusting. Real estate that is flexible and far more affordable. Housing is the single biggest expense facing Toronto families and the toughest barrier to inclusivity. Keep in mind these key words: inclusivity, diversity, sharing. Let me explain something to you. This is socialism wrapped nicely in wonderful, sustainable development. To make Quayside a complete community, communism, Sidewalk has developed several tools that help achieve affordability, from technology that lowers construction costs to innovative financing and partnerships with government. In Quayside, Sidewalk plans to deliver modular buildings using advanced manufacturing to save time and money during construction. Sidewalk will also demonstrate a flexible building typology loft with a strong shell and minimalistic interior. You can't own anything. You can't afford anything. That makes it quick and easy to convert building uses, as I just mentioned before, to enable adaptable buildings while ensuring good standards. Sidewalk will test outcome-based codes using embedded sensors to monitor for negative impacts such as noise or pollution. Every noise is captured. Every piece of pollution, including your breath, is also captured. Sidewalk will also explore new occupancy models that rely on shared space, such as co-housing, to further lowering costs. Ready to live with a stranger? Drawing on its long history developing affordable housing in New York City, the Sidewalk team will pursue innovative financing approaches in Quayside. Sometimes the best fit will be a partial home ownership program. Other cases may require a rental subsidy. Critically affordable housing in Quayside will not be relegated to separate buildings. Sidewalk's approach will be for residential facilities throughout the neighborhood to house residents with a range of incomes. But that is not enough, according to Sidewalk and Google. For trips within Quayside, Sidewalk will provide a robust walking and biking infrastructure, including expansions of Bike Share Toronto, working with Waterfront Toronto and the city. You know, I mean, bikes are great, walking's great, solar energy's great, capturing rainwater's great, sustainable energy could actually be a good thing. Technology could actually be used to benefit humanity. Instead, no. That's not where they're going with this. More on that in a minute. Sidewalk hopes to extend transit links to the waterfront, specifically the 501 and 514 streetcar routes. Sidewalk will also pilot a self-driving transit shuttle. There is no driver. So what happens, you know how many times Google has a bug? Okay, well, it's not that big of a deal if it's on YouTube, or it's not that big of a deal if it's on the search engine. You know, it's just a little minor blip. Well, imagine if that blip was the self-driving transit shuttle shutting down in the middle of the track, and you've got to get to work on time. Or even worse, imagine if that little blip ran the transit shuttle off the rails. A strategy identified in the Quayside Draft Vision document. Sidewalks Semaphore Lab will be using sensing technology to detect pedestrians and cyclists and prioritize their safe movement through congested intersections. Finally, Sidewalk will create an urban freight transit system using robots to make deliveries via utility channels. So again, you don't own a vehicle. Sidewalk's approach begins by restricting conventional vehicles, non-emergency, from a large portion of the neighborhood after a transition. But let's jump back to the house. They plan on building these residential areas. Sustainable living. I want you to watch this graphic because Shark is actually the company that they're going to be using to heat your home with sewage water, and of course, to drink from as well. Sidewalk plans to use sewage to heat and cool homes within Quayside, depending on what contractor and or company Sidewalk will has yet to be determined. However, below is an example of how tech giants, climate fanatics, plan to reuse sewage in your home. I mean, this is, as you can see here with the orange arrows, that goes out. It goes into this massive sewage tank that's right next to, well, the living space, right next to your shower. And then, of course, it comes back in. It comes back in through the Shark filter. And then, of course, it's passed through another filter. And whether they're using it for heating or whether they're going to reuse it and put it back in your sink, because as you can see on the website right now, christianjournal.net, with this particular report, he's saying that you're going to save water consumption as well because you're going to reuse sewage water. They've already put this in practice in Toronto. They're taking sewage water from the hospitals and using it in some buildings. Sewage water from hospitals would contain an enormous amount of chemicals, number one, and of course all the other crap that's in there. But it's going back into buildings. The next time the left, or a liberal, or anyone for that matter, says, I agree with sustainable development, we'll just bring up this reference. The next time you go to the bathroom, every time you flush the toilet, you're wasting water. You need to pick that back up and use it for heating, or use it for cooking, or use it to shower in. I mean, that sounds utterly disgusting and way out there. But folks, I'm not kidding. This is from their presentation. Thermal energy, sewage heat, from various sources including Shark, as you just previously saw, Thermwind, TubeWind, Ratharum, PKS, Therm Pipe, manufacturing data, geothermal engineering assumptions, sewage heat from Shark manufacturing data, small system. I mean, this is what they are planning to use. Now, as I said, rainwater, solar energy, wind energy, all those are great, but sewage to heat housing and to, you know, reuse to drink. I mean, that cannot be correct, right? But these are the cities of the future, folks. Every breath and word monitored. We've all exposed how creepy Google is. Google will be in every aspect of your life. Active demand management. This is Nest. Google Nest. Everything on this is monitored. How do you think they collect that data? Through microphones, through sensors? Well, now they would be everywhere throughout this city. When we originally began to expose sustainable development for what it is, I don't think any of us really realized exactly how many sensors, exactly how many microphones, and just how bad they were planning to make it. Here is another thing from their presentation. Every breath and every word monitored. This is inside 120 Jacobs Ave, which is someone's house. Example of map and account in action. A resident uses his or her account to temporarily grant a maintenance worker access to their front door, meaning anyone who has access to the API, not the key, not the physical key, but an API, not to mention hackers and so on and so forth, can open your door and come on in. A car is allowed to use a street segment for a period of time. A building superintendent is granted rights to access apartments to conduct repairs. The fire department is given access on emergency basis to any apartment where a fire alarm is triggered. Can you see this tracking that is taking place? This is not just little piece of land that Google is building this on. And of course, Google's going to put their headquarters there as well, their second headquarters. They are planning to expand this across the globe. They were going to start in another city, but Toronto's the one they chose. Quayside is just a test. They openly say this, with plans to massively expand. This is the entire property the 800 acres, placed within New York City, the eastern waterfront would span east-west from East River to the Hudson River, and the full length of Manhattan's High Line from north to south, an area containing at least 7 distinct neighborhoods, each with their own individual character. So as you can see, if they were to take this model and place it into New York City, it would expand from there. If they were to place it in Venice, as a point of comparison with another city built entirely on the water, the eastern waterfront would just about encompass the entire city of Venice, which means that they're not just building this on one little neighborhood, one little community. They're planning to expand this. I want you to keep that in mind. Of course, this could go horrifically south and Toronto could cancel the deal with Google. That's always a prayer, you know. The citizens could revolt and say, this is disgusting, we're living on top of sewage in our own, like sewage pipes are running in our house from my neighbor down the street. And of course they could say, this is ridiculous, we don't want this anymore. And things could change, but given the current trend with Agenda 2030 in the United Nations, it doesn't look like they're going to be accepting revolt or accepting other opinions. Hey, that's communism and socialism, right? There is 140 pages, and I've shown you the first 3. The first 3, of course, a few of the back pages to grab some of the other data from their presentation. There's 140 pages, folks. There is so much in this document. Learn more at christianjournal.net. We've got a lot more in this. We have the entire 3-4 pages of presentations for you to review and for you to find things. Because chances are these little developments of infrastructure are beginning to take place in your city. You just don't know it yet. Like, for example, in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, there is also a reusing sewage plants for heat and such. There are companies there that are trying to do the same thing. In New York, of course, there's other things that are similar. All across the country, similar tactics and plans are being used to bring about sustainable cities. We've recently covered something called Metropolis, which is a video analytical platform by NVIDIA. They want to implement this in large cities and create almost like a net of where every single security camera is linked in to one central location. And of course, NVIDIA is going to have access to that information. This enormous amount of control, the enormous amount of disgust that should come from sewage, from reusing sewage. These are things to think about. Because regardless of whether we like it or not, this is where they want us to go. This is sustainable development. This is the Agenda 2030 that we've exposed. Originally, we were worried about Trump implementing these sorts of ideas, but it doesn't look like he's going to right now. That is all the information I've got for you. I want to thank you all for watching and listening. God bless and carry on.